Hi, all. Let's see. It's the first time we're doing this on. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. It's the first time we're doing this here on YouTube, so how exciting is that? Hi, Angela. Okay, try to make something go away here. There we go. Can you guys hear me? Somebody, you can hear me. I just want to make sure you can hear me and post a little comment there because it does pop up for a second. Oh, thank you, Chrissy. I could always count on Chrissy. So I don't think I need to tell you where we are. And thank you, Angela. And we're actually going to sit here for a bit because this is the best vantage point to see her. Hi, Sharon. I'm so glad you guys found me here on the YouTube, and it worked. I have to thank Chrissy and my friend Jenny for many, many times. I kept testing the links to make sure that it would work, and if it worked on the laptop and the phone, but here we are. So thank you guys for joining me. 4 years ago today. Can you believe it? It doesn't, it feels like a lot longer, but it also felt like to get to this point seemed like forever. So it's kind of exciting that now we're only like a year away from it reopening. And there's so much a lot is going to happen. It's going to happen fast here. So it's going to be kind of exciting. But I thought I'd give you a little background. And then I also, because we're up here, and fortunately, you can't see one of the doors, but I'm going to give you some of the history on the doors, which I wanted to do when we did this a couple years ago. That we did this a couple years ago when I was doing the live walks with Crystal when we first started. And, but we couldn't see, of course, the doors, and they had changed this wall down below. And I'm going to take you down there and show you some of these pictures that are down there because they just redid this. They just changed it out. And it's so these pictures down there, if you could kind of see them, are absolutely amazing. But the Notre Dame itself goes back to 1161, and what used to stand here in the pave of Notre Dame here where we look, there used to be quite a few tiny little chapels, and one of the chapels that was here was the chapel of Saint Etienne. So that's partially why Saint Etienne du Mont is named that up there at the top of the hill, because excuse me, it was named in homage to Saint Etienne. So that was the first church, and it dates back to the 6th century. And then in 1161, the bishop, Maurice de Sully, decided that he wanted to build this grand church that would basically rival anything in the Western world. And he actually dipped into his own pockets and paid to have this built. So it actually was 1161 when they started doing it, but in 1163 is when Pope Alexander III was here in Paris, and he, in front of Louis VII and Sully, laid the very first stone. So 1163, 860 years ago, which is insane to think of how long ago that is. When it was built, it was 416 feet long, 109 feet high, and 131 feet wide. Just massive. And of course, she is the biggest church in Paris. The second biggest is Saint Sulpice, but it is, you kind of forget how huge it is in there, just because there's just so much beautiful, the chapels and everything in there is absolutely gorgeous. And I'll get into a lot of what's actually happening right now, some of the really cool things that they're actually doing. But in 1196, Sully died, and then it was quite a few different bishops after that that took care of it. He left in his will an immense amount of money that was to go to create the roof, so the lead roof that was being created, and it was something like 43,000 sheets of lead that were put up on the roof. Of course, we know what happened to that. And what happened that there's actually a sign here It's on the, I'm actually sitting up here in these little risers that they built. And there's actually a sign here that says how you shouldn't be touching your face or eating, and make sure to wash your hands after here because there is still a lot of lead in the area, even 4 years later. But during the revolution, of course, it ended up becoming a depot. It became the Temple of Reason. It was used to deposit ammunition and everything else under the sun. And on April 18th, 1802, so we're almost to the anniversary, Napoleon actually turned it back into and said, this is now back to the Catholics, and this is back into being a Catholic church again. In 1831, Mr. Victor Hugo wrote a little book called Notre Dame de Paris, or The Hunchback of Notre Dame in America. And that book, because he would walk by here all the time and he would see Notre Dame and just how horrible, like it was just falling apart. It was not doing well. The kings of Judah that are up there had been pulled down and decapitated, and the whole church just was in a really bad state, and so was the inside of it. The inside of it was falling apart. So he wrote this book, and partially to get the attention of people onto the church, and that's exactly what it did. Because when that book came out, everybody decided to come down here and thought this was something they needed to save. If you watch the walk we just did recently when we were over at the Roman ruins, that was another thing that Victor Hugo saved because of his writing. That was articles, not a book, but Victor Hugo did a lot of stuff to save these beautiful things we have in the city. Could you imagine if they just decide this just was torn down? I mean, I guess none of us would really ever know that, right? But it would be another of those things that, like the Palais des Tuileries, where it's like, oh, wonder that would have been really cool to see. But now, thankfully, we have it, and she's here. From 1845 to 1864, Viollet-le-Duc was the one that won the competition to restore it with Lazou. They had just completed the restoration of Sainte-Chapelle, which is just behind me, and they won the competition, and they were picked to restore all of Notre Dame. And Viollet-le-Duc did a lot. He added the gargoyles, he replaced the kings of Judah up there. He did basically the inside chapels that are all painted. Those are all designs that he did. Some of the stained glass work inside in the chapels was from his designs. Like, what he did was just absolutely amazing. He's definitely one of my favorite architects of Notre Dame. But now my other one is Philippe Villeneuve, who I love. But the spire itself that we, sadly lost, that the first spire in 60 Minutes just did a story last weekend, and I watched it here on Monday, and they talked a lot about the spire because that is kind of the biggest noticeable thing that's gone. And but there was a spire before, and the spire lasted from the 13th century until 1786, and then it was taken down because it was damaged in a storm, and so they removed the spire because they were worried that it was going to, fall and crash into something or hurt somebody. But it's interesting, 60 Minutes didn't mention that. They just made it sound like the spire of Viollet-le-Duc was the only spire that's here on the church. Obviously they have, a certain amount of time they put into story that they could, report on the stories, and maybe it just is on the cutting room floor. But come on, 60 Minutes, tell the whole story. But that's why I really can't watch a lot of things because especially historical fiction stuff, because it just drives me crazy. Like that's not how that story goes. But it is, now we have it, and today is the day that something really, really fantastic happened on the fourth anniversary. So the fire, as we all know it, started 4 years ago today, and we should have done this an hour later, but the first alarm went off, and I'm sure every single one of you, and I'd love for you to put in the comments what you remember doing when you heard or you were watching it. I mean, all of us, were glued to our screens, couldn't look away. It's just devastating and so sad. But the first alarm went off at 6:18 p.m. and they were in the middle of a service in the church, and there's is actually a very, very fancy, up to date system that they had in place for the alarms and smoke detectors and everything. And there was a guy, and it was like one of his very first days on the job, and it started going off, and he was trying to figure out where it was. And so they actually thought it was in the sacristy, which is just straight where you see the yellow over there. That is the sacristy, is just right over past that, and that's where they thought it was. And so they set the first guard up there to look, and he's like, I don't see anything, it's not here. At 6:30 p.m., the alarm went off again, and at this point, they figured out where that alarm was and went up there, and then that's when they saw that there was fire. So they, at that point, they were evacuating everybody out of the cathedral, calling calling the fire department at 7 p.m. They were getting close to 150 to 200 firefighters that were here. There was 30 to 40 vehicles here, and it was really difficult. If you remember watching it, because for me, I was on the West Coast, so it was early in the morning, and I was sitting in my office, and I was by myself because nobody else came to work till like 10. And it was, something like, I don't even remember, 7:30, 8 o'clock, something like that in the morning. And I remember watching it, and I text my French fireman, and I was like, "What's going on?" As soon as I saw the thing on the bottom and I was always watching French news when I was in my office first thing in the morning by myself. And across the bottom of the screen in red, it said "Fire at Notre Dame." So I instantly texted him and said, "What is going on?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know. They might be having a training. They do this. We do this a lot to train if something was to happen in these monuments." And I was like, "I don't think it'd be on the news." And he still to this day laughs at me, who was, more than 5,000 miles away, was the one who told him that Notre Dame was on fire. He wasn't working that day, and he was stationed at a fire department in the north of Paris, and so he wasn't here that day, but we still laugh about that. But I remember asking him, it was so great that I had him to ask all these questions, because I was like, where are the firemen? Why are they getting, he's like, it's really hard to get there. He's like, in the traffic, and the streets are small around the cathedral. And he's like, they're going to bring in water. And so I was getting all this kind of great information from directly from the source, because he was listening in on their firefighter, like, radio system. So that was great, and kind of helped put my mind to ease. And then everybody else in the world, I felt, started texting and asking me, because they were like, "We know you love the Notre Dame. What's going on?" So so it was great that I had somebody that I could ask all the questions to. But as you remember, they just started rolling in here from all over the place, and then the pompiers that are just stationed just down by the end of Ile de la Cité came down, and that's where they were starting to get the water and pulling it up from the Seine and getting it up in here. At 7:10, that was when one of the firefighter captains, Captain Marc Poirot Blanc, and how much do I love this? The firefighters from the Louvre. Did you know that the Louvre has their own team and station, a firefighter station in the Louvre? So that's my new goal. But they actually came here right away as well, because of all of the treasures in Notre Dame. So, not only do you have all the paintings and there's sculptures in there, and, historic candlesticks and everything else, but of course, there's the crown of thorns, and there's the tunic of Saint Louis, and there's everything that's in the treasury, all of that stuff. So the firefighters from the Louvre, who are trained in what they would do if something like that happened, came up here as well as officials from the Ministry of Culture. And they were all here to get the immediate, most important things out. And they took it out, and they went outside out towards the courtyard of the sacristy, because that was, there was embers and everything kind of coming down from there, but they were able to get it out closer to the edge of the Seine. And then they had a bunch of trucks come in that was specifically for handling that, and they cleared out a room in the Hotel de Ville, which is just across the river from us, and they placed all of that. And I'll tell you where you get to see some of that stuff just this year. But that was, as we know, it got pretty hairy, and just watching it, just everything happened. And at 7:50 is the part I will never forget, is watching that spire kind of break in half and fall down. When it fell, that is what crushed and broke through the ceiling of Notre Dame. And when it fell, because it was 826 tons, that when it fell, it threw the doors open. So the doors that we're looking out here, it just blew the doors open because of the force and everything when it went through that. And then when that happened, that's when all of the timbers that were burning on the roof started falling into the church and everything. But it is pretty miraculous that was, most of it was just there in the center. And, the whole roof system underneath, you had the roof, and as they call the forest. And then below that, you had, all of the stone, the vaults and everything. So there was some layers of protection in between. When you're in the church, you didn't look up and see the rafters. So that's where, and also with the chapels all on the side, and that's where all of the paintings and everything is. I felt pretty safe that I was like, okay, those aren't in the line of fire. So as it was happening, I thought, okay, this is okay. Those things right now are safe. But as you all remember, they got to about 9:30 at night, and then that's when we find out that they basically had 30 minutes to save it, because the fire now at this point had come up and was getting into the towers. So it was in the south tower. There is where Emmanuel and Marie is, and those are the biggest ones and the heaviest ones. And then in the north tower is where the rest of the bells are. And so the fire started getting into the north tower, and the bells are in there, but the bells are in a the belfry is all wood. So if the fire got up there and got into the belfry, then, and those bells fell, the entire church would be destroyed. The entire thing would fall. So I remember watching it and them saying that they said that they had heard that there was, 20 or 30 minutes for them to do what they can. And in that amount of time, if they could not save it, it would not be saved. So some firefighters actually, I came up here on the side, on the south side here, and were able to get in and get over. And they went up the stairs, and then they walked over, so right above the rose window, and they were able to get in there and basically put their life on on the line to walk up there into the structure of the North Tower to put out the flames. And thankfully, as we know, they did. So the other amazing thing is that nobody died, nobody was hurt in this. It's just absolutely amazing. But I believe I know why, because it's Saint Jean Pierre. But it was, everything about that. It took until 3:30 in the morning when they say that the fire was completely under control at that point, and the fire was extinguished. So that is, it's just amazing to see. And, I think with us, most of us being in the U.S. when that happened, we were able to watch it. I mean, it was, 3:30 in the morning here. Is I can't even remember what time on the West Coast, but we're wide awake in the middle of the day, and I just remember watching everything. I was at work for a while, and then before everybody came into the office, I was like, I got to get out of here. I was like, I can't, and I kind of didn't cry, or I just kind of was watching, just stunned until later, until I think it was in the afternoon, and then I just remember seeing something and broke down. I was just in tears. But it was a hard thing, and I think our for our generation, there's the 9/11 and the burning of Notre Dame are probably the two things that you'll probably always remember that day and where it was. Because I think the thing that they found too is Notre Dame is, of course, a very Parisian landmark. It's the most visited landmark in Paris because it's free. So more people come to Notre Dame than the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre, because it's a free thing to see. And but I think she really belongs to the world. Everybody loves her. Everybody loves Notre Dame. And the outpouring that came with it, I think, stunned a lot of people. I think it really made Parisians and French people really realize how much that she really she really belonged to everybody. So, but it was, thankfully I could sit here today and look at her. I got over here at about 4:30 because I wanted to make sure I had a seat up here, and I just sat here and kind of stared at her, thinking of. I remember one night on, I think, my second trip walking through here, and it was late at night, and it was a beautiful warm night. I remember walking through here and talking to one of my best friends from high school, Joshy, and I was talking to him on the phone. I looked up, and the full moon was coming right. It was a huge full moon, and it was right between the towers. And I remember telling him, I was like, "There's just nothing more beautiful in the world than this." And that's, I'll always remember that. And every time in the like hundreds of hours I've spent inside, documenting everything, single thing in there, every painting, every candlestick, the history of every single thing, and the hundreds and hundreds of pictures. I'm so glad I have that. And I cannot wait to get back in there the day it opens. So here on the very front of the facade, when you're sitting here and you look at this, other than, scaffolding and cranes and tents, you want to think that you think she looks just fine. Of course, we don't see the spire between the towers, but she looks like she's in pretty good shape from here. But the front of the facade is divided into three sections. So you have the lower section, you have that whole midsection, and then you have the towers. And everything on here looks very symmetrical. But if you actually look towards the left. Here, let's see if I can zoom in here. So let's see, get this down a little. Oops. Okay, let's see if we can. Nope, other way, other way, other way. Okay, so on the left-hand side there is the North Tower is a little bit wider than the South Tower. And you could tell because if you count the kings, hey, let's go the other way, guys. If you count the kings, there's 9 on the left side, and there's 8 on the right side. So it's not very noticeable, but when you really look, and a lot of that is because the door on the right is the oldest one and it dates back a very, very long time, which I'll tell you about. But it is kind of cool that they are, it is just a little bit wider than the other one. Um, not the kings on it. I just wrote a thing about them that I had on my Instagram the other day. All week I've been posting all this stuff about Notre Dame, and I was thinking today of trying to compile all of it in one place, and maybe I'll do that in this week's newsletter so you can just kind of read all of them. They will, of course, all be there when I get around to doing my book and put all that together. But when you look at the kings of Judah, and during the Revolution, they thought they were the kings of France, and so that's why they pulled them down to the ground, chopped off their heads. But they're actually the kings of Judah. And when Viollet-le-Duc did these, and he redid them because the kings were, when they took them down the Revolution, they were in a pile here on the Parve for 3 years, and things were growing on it, and I guess it was kind of stinky. And so finally the residents around here was like, told the city, they're like, get this out of here. And so the city ended up just giving it to stonecutters, saying, just take this. And so this one gentleman was working on on redoing this gentleman's property, and he needed stones to build a wall. And the guy came by and dropped him off, and then the owner of the house saw them and said, hey, I think I know what those are. And it's a Catholic rule that if you come across a statue of a saint and they are marred or broken, that you're supposed to bury it. And so when he found these, he buried them into his property. Well, later in the 70s, when that the property was sold, and we're talking, well over 100 years at this point, that when that property was sold, it was they were doing work on it, and they discovered these heads. And so they ended up calling the archaeologists and everybody else, and then they realized what they were, and they realized that they were, here are the heads from Notre Dame. And those are now in the Cluny Museum. So I had some pictures of those I put on my Instagram yesterday or the day before, and you could see them. So I was super excited. I remember coming my first trip, it was just before the Cluny closed, and only about 20% of it was open, but the heads were there. I got to see those. And then also some of the bodies. So you see them with some of the gowns and everything. They're all in one room. And they have some other pieces that are from Notre Dame too, which is cool and to go check out. But if you look kind of closer at them, it's really cool because I think it's, what is it, the fifth one in, if you count across, the fifth one in on the left, that is Viollet-le-Duc's friend, Pierre-Aimé Quillon. He was the first fire inspector of Paris. Kind of fitting now that there's a fire inspector there. That's case number 1 for why she survived. Then you go 3 over from there, and that is Viollet-le-Duc. So that's the face of Viollet-le-Duc. And I'll post some pictures of this so you can see it a little bit better. Then if you go all the way to the right side, the 6th in from the right side is Antoine Lazoux, who was the other architect. And of course, Viollet-le-Duc also put his face on one of the statues that was on the very top. of it that luckily was saved. But up there in the middle is the rose window, of course. And the rose windows, really kind of one of the first ones was in Saint Denis. So Abbe Sujet was one of the first ones to create these rose windows. And so he was actually brought on here into this project. Let me zoom back out of here for you. He was brought on to this project to work on those. And so those actually date back to the 13th century. And when Viollet-le-Duc started doing this, in Gothic architecture, not only is that rose window beautiful, and especially from the inside when you get to see it with all the colors, it's also structurally important to the cathedral itself. So when he did it, he took all of the glass out. They actually reinforced it, so the center of it, where you see like this, the well, not the very very small center, but the middle one, I guess, kind of the middle circle around it, that he added into there because it was adding more support. And then he just turned it. He took everything out and he basically shifted everything like a quarter turn. So it actually made it so it was stronger and it was more supportive of the actual structure. And everything in this Gothic architecture is about holding everything else up. So the flying buttresses, what you don't see from the very front, all of those pieces are there to hold the cathedral up, and what was also what they were very worried about when the fire happened. And then if you go down, so we can't unfortunately see the door that's there on the left, but that is the one that is the portail de la Verge, the door of the Virgin. So she's kind of there past the woman fixing her hair. And I have two mysteries that I'm still yet to get answers to. Why this one has that straight kind of triangle around the door. I was told by one person, they said, "Oh, we don't know because it needs to make it look bigger." And I'm like, "No, I don't think there's usually in Gothic architecture there's a reason for everything." But I have these two immense books, one that I've been wanting since I went into to Notre Dame that I found in the Louvre. And I'm going to find that answer, and you guys will be the first to know. But the Door of the Virgin goes back to the 13th century. It reads as a story of the life of the Virgin Mary, and it is below. So when you see the ones on the middle one and the one on the right, and then you read it from the top. So you have the center part, and that is the top where you read it. So the other one is kind of her story going up. I'll put a picture of these, but the top one is her being crowned by the angels, and she's with Jesus. So now she's up in heaven. And the middle part is the Assumption of the Virgin, where she's being placed into the tomb. And then the bottom of it is the Old Testament kings and prophets. So in the center one, though, which is really cool, um, the center one is the Last Judgment. But and then the one on the left, which is what makes me sad I can't see it, is the one that has Saint Denis on it. So on the left side it has Saint Denis, and on either side he has an angel on either side, and then also Constantine. And on the right side you have Saint John the Baptist, Saint Etienne, and Saint Genevieve, as well as Saint Sebaster. But the middle one is the Last Judgment. This one is also from 1210. It is the basically the reminder of those coming into the church, what it's like. So a lot of these things on the churches were all like with when you could basically read the story on the church with sculpture, because a lot of people couldn't read back then. So you would actually read these things on the church with the sculptures. So the one in the center is the Last Judgment, and it is at the very top of it, you have Christ and you have angels holding instruments of the Passion there. If you could kind of, maybe I could see if I could kind of read my way in that. Let's see. Somebody's, you can kind of see it's in the shadows, but if you look to the right down below, there's people in there working. Um, but this one is, and then in the middle of it, it's on the left is the saved and the right are the damned. And it has Saint Michael there in the middle of it holding the scales of justice, and just to the right of him is the devil. So you can kind of see that from here. And then below that are just different saints there. And this one is actually really cool if we can see the bottom of it, because in the bottom of it, the center of the door was removed in the 18th century under Suffo. The architect Sufo, because he thought it was in the way, and they wanted to be able to get inside the church with larger pieces. So they actually cut the door, the bottom of the door, and but luckily that was then later replaced. But the one on the right, this one's actually pretty cool because this is the oldest one. So it's the smallest, but it is the oldest. And so this was actually in the Church of Saint Etienne, right over there. And it is it's just the Portail de Saint Anne. And so this is the door of Saint Anne, who's the mother of Mary. And so this kind of just has her story as well. The middle section of it has the nativity in there. You have the three kings, so it's all about Saint Anne and her daughter and their whole story. So it's really cool because when you could get up closer to it, and it's even when it was open, it was really hard to really be able to just stop and really look at these pieces because that door on the right is the entrance, the door of the Virgin is the exit, and then the middle one you kind of can't really get to except for in front, and then there's just so many people. So I used to come in here like 7:30 in the morning when it would open because I could kind of get in there without a lot of people. But the door, I always call them the devil doors because those doors are amazing. And if you've seen them, excuse me, sir, and they're really, really cool. So the the gentleman, the locksmith that did it, his name was Biscornet, and he was said they came to, they were looking for somebody to do these doors, and he's like, yeah, I could do it. And they said, yeah, but we need these done really quick. And he's like, yeah, I could do it. I have plenty. I could get it done in time. And the story is, oops, sorry. The story is that he sold his soul to the devil because they came to check on him and see how the progress was on the doors, and they found him done. And they were like, "There's no way he could have done these six huge doors in this amount of time." With there's so much on there, if you remember. I mean, it's the whole entire thing. It's this beautiful dark wood, and then it's just all that gorgeous iron woven all over it. And they said that he must have sold his soul to the devil. So when they put the doors in, and the one in the center, they tried to open it that day for mass, and it would not open, but they poured holy water on it, and then it opened up. So, and after that, he actually died not long after the doors were finished. So you be the judge of it. I just say it's one of those that the devil's in the details kind of a tour, but I think, now we have them, and it's, the good has outweighed the bad. But the center door is also where they have like what everybody says is kind of a little hidden message because they have the alchemist there. There's one of the carvings is of the alchemist, which was something at that time, was like more like witchcraft than anything. Get out here. So now, so look at this. There's lots of people. But this morning, and last night was raining so much. And then when I was actually didn't leave my house except for to go across the grocery store to grab a few things early this morning. I was home all day working on my notes for this and also for the podcast. We're going to do an episode about this for the podcast that'll be out Monday. And when I walked down here, I was like, oh, look at that blue sky. I'm so happy. It's so nice out now, just in time for us. But so for the rest of the church, with what was created, so the spire, which is the biggest thing that we know today, the original ones, as I said, was from the 13th century to 1786. The one that we saw up there that was destroyed in the fire was done 1857. In 1859, the rooster was added in June 1859. That is when they placed him up there. In 1935, the rooster was taken down to be regilded, and that was when Cardinal Verdier put in the three relics. And I used to share this story all the time because I thought it was the coolest thing in the world about the rooster long before the fire. And even when I would post it on Instagram, not many people seemed to think it was that cool. I wouldn't get a lot of comments. I was like, come on, you guys, this is like the coolest thing. Way up there, and like high above the city of Paris, is this rooster, and inside that rooster, there is a piece of a relic of Saint Denis, who is the patron saint of Paris, that we know got his head chopped off, and he picked up and walked 3 kilometers with his head. Then there's a piece of Saint Genevieve, who was the one who saved Paris many times. So they're the two saints of Paris. She saved it many times. The first being from Attila the Hun, and she would go on to more than 1,000 times over between the end of her life and I would say 4 years ago today, she would continue to save Paris. So, and then there was also a piece of the crown of thorns. So that was up there. And so, because Saint Genevieve has saved the city of Paris so many times, and she was above there on the rooster, I believe that is why we still have her today, Saint Genevieve. And we did two podcast episodes about her because she was just too much to fit into one. I think in 2021, January 2021, I believe. I'll put all those links out too. But I think that's why she's saved. But the spire, the one very, very exciting thing that as of today, April 15th, 2023, the base is now in place and the spire is being built. So 4 years ago today, we lost it, and 4 years ago today, the base of it is on, and it's been all over the news here. The president was here yesterday to see the progress of where they're at, and so I have some really cool pictures that I will share that I grabbed off of the news, and it's a whole huge footing. So it's called it's like 80 tons already, and it is the base for it. And so they dropped it in place. And I don't think we'll walk around the side, and I think we're just too close. We're not going to be able to see it. You kind of have to be from above. But the base underneath it, the basically the ceiling of the cathedral in there is filled in, and now this base of the spire, because they have to build up the spire before they could build the roof. Because if you look at the plans, which I have pictures of that I saw the plans when I came here for Patrimoine, the base of the spire has to come from inside the roof, and then they'll build the roof around it. But they were saying, so now what next is going to happen is they're going to build a huge, immense scaffolding that's going to go way up in the sky, higher than the towers we see. And then as they're putting in the pieces of the spire, so I'm going to plan to come here at least once a week, every single week, this year, and take a photo and maybe make a video, and we could just keep an eye and follow the building of it. I can't wait. I'm so excited. And then that's why this huge, immense crane arrived here, because that was brought here to help put that into place. And so it's four huge pillars that go down into basically sitting there, and then they will hold. There's like a big it's like there's a big circle in the middle, and then it's going to come up from there. They are using the exact plans that Viollet-le-Duc did when he designed it, because that's how it was voted on, that everything has to be built exactly the same way that it was, and with the exact same methods. So, thank goodness that this happened in France, that they have, all of these people that are still doing these ancient techniques of medieval building that they use all over France to restore things, because here in this country, that is very important to them. And so that is what I am just I'm not happy any of this happened, but I'm glad this happened here. The roof itself, as we know, is called the forest. That is because it was made up of 1,300 trees, which was 52 acres. But when that was built, those 1,300 trees came from church properties, bishops and canons' properties that they owned. Because, back then the church had an insane amount of money. And so all of the trees that were used to build the roof came from their properties. The spire itself is 1,000 pieces of timber. And then it's another well over 1,000 that's going to be used to rebuild the roof. After the fire, 273 donations came in of just trees, of just offers to give oak. They wanted specific noble oak, because that is what was used for the original roof. Half of those came from private landowners, and then the other half came from state owned and public forests. A third of France is actually covered in forest, which I was kind of surprised to learn. But they cut the very first one down on March 5th, 2020. So they've been harvesting and collecting all of this timber since, right? I mean, pretty much not even a year after the fire. And there was one gentleman named Daniel Pichon of the Pichon Frere, his family, his father actually started, they had a sawmill, and then they ended up having more, they bought forest acreage, and then they actually, it's their own trees. So he is getting retired soon, but he cut down the very first tree that they're going to use. It's 4 feet wide, and it's 88 feet high. And there's a very specific, so they're even looking ones that have a specific bend in it for certain pieces. So it's not just, it can't just be like, hey, I've got this tree over here in my yard. Do you want it? It's they're very specific. And then they used a lot of forestry um, lumberjacks that really, really know these forests, and they will say, oh, we know exactly the tree. So they were able to save a ton of time because they were using these experts that already knew their land and everything, so they were able to get all this stuff right away. It's going to be basically, it'll be the equivalent of €1 million that is needed in wood that they all got donated. So this doesn't even count the donate all of the donations that have come in. And one thing I also thought was interesting is that all of these trees each year had to be cut down by March 15th, because at that point the sap and everything, the levels in a tree change with the seasons, and it is better to cut them down before March 15th, before they'll start getting, really working their juices up there. And they cut them, and they shape them, and then they have to leave them basically for about 9 months to a year for them to completely dry out. So these things have, they're, it felt like up until this year, every time I watched the French news, it was, oh, here's another, and they're tracking it. They would show it on the news. Here's 10 more logs from this place. Here's the 2 more logs from this forest. So they've been doing this for a while. The night of the fire, basically, because Philippe Villeneuve, who I love, he is the chief architect for the monuments of France. And he was already on the team because they were getting ready to restore the spire. That's why they had luckily taken the 16 statues off the roof. That's why they had all the scaffolding built around the spire, because they were actually going to restore it and clean it, and it had just it needed to be cleaned and re-led. So they were already in the process of working on Notre Dame when this happened, which might have actually been a good thing. um, but they all are, he's involved. Sometimes he even goes out to these forests. He goes out there to see the actual trees that are being used, which is all really, really cool. And then there was one that story that I love, that it was the family, the Darcourt, and the Philippe Darcourt. They have a private forest in their family since the 12th century, and they gave 5 trees for Notre Dame. So it's really cool. When I wrote something today, I'll post tonight, my time on Instagram, about how, there's the history, which, I spend all my time in history. And my mom used to say, if she's watching, she used to say that I like spending my time with dead people more than living people. And it's kind of true. But what we're looking at every single day, and what I get to look at every single day, is we're living history at this moment. And while I talk about Viollet-le-Duc and how, amazing he was, generations from now they're going to be talking about Philippe Villeneuve, I hope, and all the work that he did to restore it. And so that's actually really, really cool. But these families, like the Darcourt family, they've had this forest in their family for 12th century, and then these people are all a part of the future history of Notre Dame, which is pretty amazing. Look at how beautiful the sky is now. But inside of it, you have, they've been working on everything. And what's really cool is Philippe Villeneuve had said that, when Notre Dame reopens, it's going to be like pristine, because without the fire, this the work they're doing would have taken, 2 decades, because now, they'd have to work around people coming in and closing things off, and now they could go in there and clean everything. The walls and stuff had been so sooty from decades and decades of soot from candles and everything, that now when you go in there, like, to see the color that you see, how, this lighter color, that's the color of inside now. And it used to be almost gray, because it just was so dirty. That dirt and dust saved the stained glass windows, because not a single stained glass window was lost in this. But all of the different chapels that I mentioned earlier, that were the design of Viollet-le-Duc, they're redoing all of those. They're touching up the paint. They're cleaning it. The bas relief that went around the choir, they're completely redoing that. Like literally every single thing in here. All of the paintings that they took out of here of the Les Mis, those are all getting restored. Everything is getting cleaned and restored, and it's going to be just, she's going to just be shiny and gorgeous by the time we come back in here. But the stained glass, some of the ones that were in there around the sides that were done, a lot of those designs were done by Viollet-le-Duc himself. But then it was really cool because I remember seeing these things, and there was some of them were done by a stained glass artist named Auguste Stinel. And Stinel was the father-in-law of Marguerite Stinel, she was married to Alphonse, and he was also an artist. And we just did a podcast episode about her a couple weeks ago. She was the one who was in front of the church. How should I say this? She was with the president in a compromising position, and he died. We'll just leave it at that. But I love how all of these stories always connect back to each other, which is just so cool. Um, in there, there's the 24 chapels, and all of those 24 chapels, as I said, are getting all cleaned, and it's just going to be gorgeous. But Philippe was saying that this is an opportunity to have every single part of her clean. He was the one. If you watch it on 60 Minutes, or if not, you can find it. I think it's even on YouTube. He ended up having the spire of Notre Dame tattooed on his arm. And back in September, when I was right here down below in this very spot for Patuan weekend, and I came first thing in the morning on the first day, and he was here, and I was looking at these big books that it's basically his architectural specific books with every little detail in it. And I spent about 2 hours going through them, and he was there, and I was so nervous. And then I actually got the nerve up to talk to him, and basically was trying not to fangirl out and freak out. But I got to talk to him, and he was telling me that he's like, no, it's on track for it to open in April. I keep seeing the date of December 8th, 2024 on everything. But he told me that they were actually ahead of schedule, considering, you had COVID and everything else they've had to deal with, doing things, and then realizing, like just the part of taking apart the scaffolding that was around the spire was something that took, a year and a half. That was the last big thing to do, and that was the most temperamental of all of the things. So it's pretty cool that I have pictures of him. I didn't take any pictures with him. I wasn't that I couldn't get the nerve up to do that, but it still is one of my most favorite moments, I think, is getting to talk to him. And every time I see him, I actually just love him, and just what he's doing is just amazing. I just noticed when you look up at the top, I have a photo that my grandpa took of my grandma at the very, very top, where those two little domes are, the little pinnacle domes. I have a picture of my grandma standing right next to that. It's one of my favorite pictures of her, right up there on the South Tower. Um, but everything in here, one of the other things that they just discovered while doing this is, because of the roof and because everything was just completely destroyed and burnt off of the roof. When they went in there, and the stones that encircle the very top of the nave that go all the way around, they ended up finding these huge iron huge staples, and they were in there, and they were literally holding together the stones. He used them as like you would use a staple to hold that pieces of paper together, and it just basically linked each one. And so they started finding these. They knew these were in the cathedral, but they found these up on the top, and they believed that actually helped hold the entire structure up there together, so that it didn't just fall during the fire, because while it is stone, it with all that water on there, it does absorb it, and then what happens is it pushes some of the salt to out of it, and when it pushes all the salt out to the edge of the stone, and then it gets really brittle and just basically falls away. So that's what they've been dealing with up there, is dealing with all of these the stones that basically kind of fell apart. But they found these staples up there, and before that, they you could find them in Rome and other places, but not used to the way that Viollet-le-Duc used them. So he was really ahead of everybody by using that as a part of it. And I can't remember where. I think it was. I'll have to remember. I think it was in a different church I was at, and I actually saw him on the outside of the building. I'll find. I'll remember where that was and post that picture so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. But that's pretty cool. Um, during in February 2022, when they were doing work on the transept because they were getting that ready, that is when they also got down and found two sarcophagus down there. One of them they figured out by everything about it that it was the priest Antoine de la Porte who died in 1710, about 80s in his 80s. And then the other one they just called the Cavalier because they're not sure, but they could tell that the guy rode horses a lot. And then he probably died of tuberculosis, but they don't know. But they do know that because they were in these very fancy iron sarcophagus, which were really kind of just really for the elite. But we don't know who that is. But they found a bunch of different statues. I'm sure all those things will kind of come back here into the church. As for the stained glass, as I was saying, nothing was destroyed. They did remove the 39 windows that went around the very top of the church to the closest to the roof. They removed all of those to really check to make sure. And everything was fine again, probably because it had an inch of dust on it. But nothing was hurt. Nothing was destroyed. A few things had some little cracks in it, but everything. I mean, when you think of this fire and how big it was, what could have happened was is so much more than we're very lucky nobody died. We're lucky that nothing was really destroyed other than the roof and the spire. Nothing was lost on the inside, none of the paintings or anything. So it's even our wonderful Virgin Mary, who there is the copy of one down here. Kind of see her right there. That's the copy. The original is in Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois. But nothing, we're really lucky that nothing was really lost here. After the fire, if you remember, there was over 845 million euros donated to the restoration. A lot of that, some of those came from the really big businessmen of France, and then it took them a while, and some of them haven't still completely coughed up the money yet. Like there's LVMH and Pinot, and there's a lot of those guys. That took them a little bit. Promising it is one thing, but you got to give it, cough it up. But the donations came from 150 countries. So even though there was these huge millions and millions of dollars coming in from these very wealthy people, it was, if you look at it, it's actually, there's more money made up of just people giving $10, $20 from all over the world. And so that is actually really cool. So they still need more. When he was on 60 Minutes, they were like, send us more money. We need more money. But it is pretty cool. The organ inside of it that is right behind the rose window, none of it was damaged. Of the 8,000 pipes, they took everything out and they had to clean it because of the dust, and they have to do that every 15 years anyway. So they took everything out. Oh, hi. And they are going to put, that'll be one of the last things they put back. But when they put it back in, they'll have to go in there at night when nobody else is there to tune it, and it'll take like 3 months to get it tuned and put back into exact working order, which is pretty cool. But that is what they've done and what they're doing here. And there's a whole village basically here. This down below here, the tent that's there on the left, that is now where sculptors are working. So this area at first was used because they saved every single thing, every single beam, every burnt beam, every piece of stone, every single thing that fell off of it, they saved, and they're going to incorporate it back into the structure if they can. Not the burnt pieces, of course, but the stones. And in that structure there on the left is where the stonecutters are working on redoing things now. So I think that was actually on 60 Minutes as well. They showed one of the girls that's doing that. And it's amazing art form. Here in September, they had all those people here, so you could go walk right up and see the different people working on all of this that are all a part of the restoration. So why don't we, because actually I've already been sitting up here for what, 50 minutes? We'll head down and I'll walk you over here and show you guys these photos, and then walk around the side because just in the last 6 or so months, they opened up the side where Charlemagne is. I hope I can see your comments later, because where I'm sitting in the sun up there, I can't see the comments very well. We'll walk over here. See if I can't get. Oh, there we go. So they just redid this, and I liked it the first time they had it because they had the pictures of the doors and they had all this description. But this was done. These photos were done by that gentleman, Thomas Van Houtreef. I'm not sure how to say that, but he works for National Geographic, and so he did all these pictures. And they do have, I think you have a bit of a reflection here, but check out he came in there. With he trained with them so he could go up there on the scaffolding and tie himself and hang himself down there. But you can look at how cool that is with the gargoyles, and you have the brace that's back there holding up the rose window. None of those things were damaged, but they did that to protect it. The roof you see just down below on the left, the white part, that was actually a retractable roof. It's on rollers. And so right below, because that's kind of right over where the spire is, that where it was, that they were able to actually wheel that back and forth when they were working on it so they could keep it covered before they could cover the inside. And here, the inside of it now is literally just floor to ceiling scaffolding so they can get up and down and around. So you can see just how big that all of this is. These pictures are taken in 2020. So in December 2020, so about a year and a half. That was the whole. This, ugh. And I got to see, I'll tell you at the end here, some really cool things to come and see this year and into next year, where you could actually see some of those beams. That is also in the center. You see some of those columns that went all the way down. Two of the columns there in the middle were slightly cracked. And so they had to shore those up pretty quickly, because if not, that could actually, there's so many different things because with Gothic architecture that if one little thing went, the whole thing could come down. This, of course, is a St. Thomas. This is one of the 16 statues on the top, which I've talked about a lot. I love them, but this is the one of St. Thomas, and this is the one that is Viollet-le-Duc. So he was the only one that was turned around looking up to the spire. All the other apostles and they were all looking down. And so Viollet-le-Duc, of course, made himself St. Thomas because he's a patron saint of architects, and he was looking up at the spire, which I love. And you could go see that in Paris up close. Look at this. Look at all that scaffolding here. They have like a whole system. There's elevators back there. There's a whole working village behind it of portables. There's a giant lake here. Well, look at this. Isn't that how gorgeous? And this is restoring that. So it's the colors that are in the ceiling of Saint Germain des Prés. They're redoing all that here. Now I have waterproof shoes on, but why don't we? I'll go back this way. We'll go the other way. I have my little waterproof boots on, but they only come up to my ankles, and I don't really want water. But over here you have Hotel Dieu. I'll take you up there. We'll be sneaky sometime, and I'll take you up there for the view. And the prefecture. And on this end of it here, they have these really cool black and white photos of Notre Dame before the fire and Notre Dame now. Here we have the lovely Our Lady. Always makes me think of my sweet friend Cheryl, who I wish we always would talk about anytime we saw anything about updates on Notre Dame, Cheryl and I always talked about it. So I wish she was here today to share this, and I'll definitely have a candle for her when we get back in. So here you can see on the left, that is March 2017, 23rd of March 2017, it says. And then here on the right is January 1st, 2022. So you see the difference, which oh, soon we'll be back there. Um, and then we have Charlemagne here. I love that we could get back over here again now. And then this I love because this is about these amazing. Look at that. Look at the. I am going to have to get up there so I can find that elephant gargoyle. How adorable is that? But these are all people working on it. See the scaffolder, chief heritage officer, rope technicians, sculptor restorer, crane operator. And I love that they're giving all of those people, their little a voice so we could see them. And here's this side. I could we'll walk over the bridge. I was going to go the other direction, but let's go this way and I'll show you. So you can see my other mystery is this one statue here on the corner that I can't find anything about, and I want to know who it is. I should have asked Philippe. Too bad he didn't give me his number. There's no way, because I would have been like, hey, Philippe, I know you're busy, but I got a question. Statue number 2 on the left. He'd be like, lady, leave me alone. But they added little toilets under here. This little path wasn't here, how you would cross. It's quite busy. But there's quite a few really super cool things. So if you're coming to Paris this year, some of these things are actually already going on. I've talked about it many, many times the last few years. Is the Architecture Museum, which I loved even before Elvis got there. But now you go in there, and of course there's the 16 statues that have been fully restored. But there is also this amazing exhibit in there about the restoration that's going on and how they're doing all of that. So with the timber, and there's also pieces of stained glass in there from Notre Dame. There's also what I just about had a heart attack was one of the maze paintings. So one of the maze paintings in there. There was 13 in there when the fire happened. There was 70 of them over time, but 13 of them were still in Notre Dame. And if I will share that story again on May 1st, but you can see all of that stuff in there, and it's really, really, really cool. That exhibit is going to go until April 29th, 2024. So you could definitely go and see it. If you've seen it if you've gone there before and seen the statues, go again, because of what they have in there now is really, really cool. They're open Wednesday through Monday from 11 to 7, but you can also see the rooster in there. We'll go down here a little bit more. You can see the cherry blossoms. This is always one of the best places to see the cherry blossoms. They even have the sacristy completely scaffolded up, so they're probably just feeling like they might as well. That wasn't hurt at all in the fire, so they're probably just thinking they'll just get everything done at once. But there's also now, and we could head back over there, and I'll show you because you might not know exactly where, because it used to be a parking lot. But there in the Parve, there is the museum that's there now. That in the 70s, when they were going to put a parking lot here under Notre Dame, they were digging around as they do, and found all of these medieval bases of the former chapels and churches that were here. So of course that had to stop, and they turned it into the crypt of Notre Dame. And you could go down there. There's the exhibit that's been going on for quite some time that's about Viollet-le-Duc and Victor Hugo, and how entwined they are, because Hugo inspired the restoration, of course. And that one's really cool. But on the other side of that is what used to be the parking is now they put a special exhibit down in there, and that exhibit is also all about the restoration. You have videos. Some of the stuff is a kind of a repeat of what you see at the Architecture Museum, but definitely go see both. And it's free, and you go down there. I don't think I'd have a signal, or else I'd take you guys down there. But it has all these like tons and tons of videos. If you just watched every video like I did, you'd be down there for 2 hours. And I took a million pictures. They have a really cool three-dimensional model of Notre Dame with video on it. They have uh, pieces of the timber, pieces of timber from the roof that are charred, which is very hard to see. Pieces of the sculpture, pieces of stained glass, and then they have stories about all of the people that are doing what they can to restore her and bring her back. So it's really, really cool. And again, it's free. I'll show you where that is. But my favorite thing is going to happen this year. It's going to happen because two of my favorite things will be together. It'll be a special exhibit in the Louvre. Oh, merci. Merci. No? Oh, US. Oui, très bien. Oui, I'm busy. Wait. I'm an artist. Yes. Would you mind if I do 5 minutes? No, I'm doing a live video right now. Thank you. I think that's it. I think that guy's done that to me before. But I think we've had the same exact conversation. Talked about my hair and says I don't look American. So here's this new little kind of intro center here. It's not open yet. So this also one of the things they're going to do here is they're going to do this huge. They're going to add something like 700 trees or some crazy thing like that, and you can see here where the church is and how they're adding all of these trees at the end and all the way back down below where you see that at number 5. That is going to be down on the side. So you have the send down below. And so they're adding all of this. You can see from the side. So they're doing a ton of work around here and this part of it's going to take till like 2027 to finish because this is kind of the last thing. And here's some kind of photos of what it's going to look like. I can't wait to get back so we can see the cherry blossoms, but look at that. So those look like chestnut trees, which we have some behind us here. But then there is this I haven't seen this open yet, but I'll come back during the day. But you also have, look at that. And look at, on the top, you have all the little guys right in front of her. Come on, camera. And there is the doors. They did a pretty good job of actually sort of copying what the doors look like. Look at, they even have, oh my gosh, look at guys. So, okay, so the door at the far left, third guy in without his head. Look, they even did it so he doesn't have a head. How cool is that? Oops. Okay, hang on. No, let's see the side. Oh, we're going over an hour now. I'll end it here pretty quick in case you guys have things you want to actually do today. But look at that, the little guys are up there. This is pretty amazing. Can I have this? I don't have room in my apartment, but I'd like it. But so here it is over here. So this is also where you could do the virtual reality deal. I tried doing that one time at the crypt, and because I couldn't have my readers on, it was really hard to see it. I don't think it was working. But you could do that here. That actually costs money. But you could come in here, and this is where they have the Eternal Notre Dame, and the exhibit about the rebuilding is free. So that's also really, really cool. In Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, which I mentioned about the Our Lady, that is where the original is, that is in there now. It's also where the crown of thorns are. So the Friday of Lent, and then on Good Friday they brought them out. They do bring the crown of thorns out on the first Friday of every month. Look at that with those green trees. Oh, how beautiful. They do bring it out every month on the first Friday in the afternoon, I think about 3 o'clock. So if you're here in Paris, go check that out. But as I mentioned, the Louvre on October 19th opens up an exhibit about the treasures of Notre Dame. So it's going to be a lot of those items from the treasury of Notre Dame, but then it's going to be a lot of other things that they're basically going to be able to tell the history of Notre Dame in all of these pieces. And I am so excited. Remember when they announced they were doing this, I was like, 2024 so far. But October 19th, and actually, I'll be able to go in there a couple days early. I'll be able to go to the special pre-opening, so we'll definitely share that with you. So those are just some of the things that you could go and see Notre Dame all over the place, and some of them are even free. But definitely come and check those out. There's actually also it's on June 30th, July 1st and 2nd. Is this big, huge production that's going on that includes like 200 people. It's basically a stage show and I think some choreography and music too. It's about the history of Notre Dame all the way through the fire and stuff. So I definitely want to go check that out and see that. But that is just, and that, did I do, 71 minutes. So much for keeping it to an hour, right? But I probably could keep talking about Notre Dame for about 3 more hours. You know how I feel about the Louvre. The Notre Dame, as far as my obsession and depth of info I have on, is very deep. And so I will, I've been sharing stuff all week on Instagram, and I'm going to keep sharing things for the next couple of days because we have a podcast episode we'll release. We're going to record it tomorrow morning, so it could be released Monday. And I will do that about a lot of this information so you could, keep it and listen to it. And then, of course, this will hopefully be saved on YouTube since it's the first time we're doing this. But thank you guys so much. Here, let's see. Let me try to turn it around and say hi. Did I turn it around? Come on. Hi. So thank you guys so much for joining me on this amazing anniversary of our beautiful Notre Dame. And she's still here. How great is that? And who would have thought 4 years later, I would just be here and living here and seeing it. So thank you guys so much for joining me. And I hope I could see all these comments before, after I stop. I might have to see if I could read them. But thank you guys so much. I saw Angela just now make a little comment. I can't wait to see you in like a week, right? Like a week and a half. So next Sunday, we'll do it next Sunday. And that's going to be another special one because it is going to be about my birthday buddy, because my birthday's coming up. I'm going to do it about Delacroix. So we are going to go to places he's been that we've gone to many times before, but it's going to be all about Delacroix and maybe some Marie de Medici because we also have the same birthday. So thank you guys so much. I got to race back home, get this uploaded, and then head to dinner. So thanks you guys so much for joining me, and I hope to see you. Make sure you keep checking out my Instagram this week with all the fun stuff about Notre Dame. And then I will try to figure out a way that I could save all of those, put those in one place so you guys could just look up all of the info about Notre Dame anytime you want. Okay, thank you guys so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll give you one last look at her. There she is. And what a beautiful, beautiful afternoon it turned out to be. But thank you guys so much, and I will see you later. If I figure out how to turn it off.